Hey, this is Jill Powers, coming live from Kilgore, Texas. Anyway, I've been promising people I was going to do this. I had been looking forward to this for over a year, ever since the first trailer came out for the Odyssey. So I'm going to be talking about the Odyssey, and I'm going to be reviewing the movie and explain some things about text. I'll go ahead and get started on that. First of all, the Odyssey the events occur about 1800 BCE or so. They're around there, and there is evidence, historical, archaeological evidence of the existence of Troy. And of course we know all of the history of Greece itself, of the city-states of Mycenae, where Agamemnon was king, and where all the events of the Iliad and the Odyssey began. So let's get right into it. I have a lot of criticisms of the movie, but I need to explain a few things about the epic poem itself. First of all, it's not just a book. It's a book of poetry, and it really is epic in scale. It's over 12,000 lines. It is organized in 3 acts, just as dramas would be. We have 24 total books, not including the introduction by your translators, because they always give you some kind of explanation to give you some kind of indication of exactly what we're looking at. This is the Richmond Lattimore. A copy of Richmond Lattimore. As you can see, it is definitely of a book length. Okay. So if you're serious about studying it, I would highly suggest that you read the book as well as watching the movie, and then you can compare the two, and you can see why the poem is so much superior to what we got with Nolan's version of things, which is not what it is at all. A few things that I also suggest. I've got a guide to the Odyssey here that is also book length, as you can see. This is by Ralph Hexter. Okay, and that is a commentary on the English translation by Robert Fitzgerald. I've got the copy around here somewhere as well, but you can see where all my old bookmarks are. Okay. It's something handy to have for if you're really interested in mythology. Besides Joseph Campbell's explanation of the four functions of myth, I highly suggest that you get one of these, a Penguin Dictionary of Classical Mythology, and that any kind of entry that you want to look at, like as you can see, my old bookmark, my old homemade post-it note. I've still got all this. These are all my old copies that are all highlighted, and I know exactly where to find things when I have done that. And I did that years and years and years ago, like back in the the early 90s and late 90s. I started teaching. I've taught 3 classes in classical backgrounds. I was very lucky to have a mentor who was old world. In fact, she graduated with her first PhD at the age of 25 at the University of Bocconi in Milan, and she got her second PhD at Indiana University, and she started teaching at University of Texas at Arlington in 1961, and she She passed away in 2009. God rest her soul. I call her my Italian mama. She gave me more than anyone could possibly know about this particular subject, about ethics. And it's for her. She got me into graduate school. She got me through these classes. She was one of the most difficult professors you can imagine. But she really, really did impress me a lot, and just became a mentor. It's funny that I should talk about mentor, because mentor is a character in the Odyssey, and it's actually Athena in disguise, which we're going to discuss the gods, as well as understand that the gods took sides between the Trojans and the Atreides, the Achaeans. So, yeah, she was my mentor, and I did an essay, actually for my master's comprehensive test that I took instead of doing a thesis. I took a test of 2 days of hell, 3 hours for each for 2 essays, 2 days in a row. Okay. And one I did on Thoreau's transcendentalism and Eastern mysticism, and the other I did on the women of the Iliad. And those were questions that I had no idea what they were going to actually give me before I showed up for the test. So you can't really study for it if you haven't already studied these subjects. Well, then good chance you're not going to pass it. But I did the very first time. You get 2 times, two chances. But anyway, so I did that. I am qualified to teach it. I have taught it at the college level, 2 sophomore classes at 3 different universities. Well, I should say community college and 2 universities. But 2 sophomore level World Lit classes, and then a junior level comparative lit class in classics. And the only reason why I got called in for that, I was teaching part-time, and the professor of that class died suddenly, and they couldn't find anyone else. And his wife was also worked with me at Texas Women's when I did the course over there, and I was successful with it. So she suggested that, and that's why I got to teach it. Oh, excuse me. So, anyway, that's my qualifications to teach it. Having not only taken classes, but taught it at the college level as well. So let's get started on this. First of all, I want to talk about the composition of it, which is many, many bards over generations. And with the way Greek culture was in the ancient world, that was very, very orderly. They didn't have cops or anything. They had city-states that were kind of little fiefdoms, and you had to swear fealty. This is part of their type of weregild, I guess you could say. But anyway, it is very much a society based on loyalty and what you could do for each other, and that was based upon principle of exanios. Zeus exanios, which specifically means that Zeus was not only the god of lightning, of storms. Well, his brother Poseidon was also a god of storms, but anyway, the point being, Zeus exanios, he was also the god of hospitality. And people don't realize that every situation in the Iliad and the Odyssey concerns some level of violations of Zeus's code. And whenever there were people who observed it, they were rewarded for this. We see this all throughout both of these epics. So anyway, how did they compose this? Very, very orderly indeed. We call this ring composition. That means that it is chiasmic. It is a chiasmic structure of poetry that is structured as like ABBA or ABCBA or ABCD CBA. Okay? That way you start at a certain point. You are going to start in the middle of action, in other words, what they call in media res, and have non-linear flashbacks. Problem with Nolan, I will tell you right up front, he has too many of these kind, and they're out of order in such a way that it makes it confusing for the audience. The way the ancient poets put this together was to have some kind of unity and cohesion that they could memorize, because we're talking about, you know, these 12,000 lines. That's a lot. That's a lot for a bard to remember. And also the rhyme itself also helps to aid memory. It's mnemonic, okay? And so it would have also a kind of aesthetic to the structure. It is very organized, okay? So it was originally in dactylic hexameter, those 11-footed lines. And generally, whenever it would be translated into English, it would be like in unrhymed iambic pentameter, because that works best in English. You have to be careful of words whenever you're translating that, especially when you're going back in time, way back in time. The further you go back, the further certain concepts don't always translate very well. So you have to have someone who is a skilled translator and being a skilled poet. That's why, one of the reasons why, excuse me, well, Alexander Pope's translation, he was an excellent poet, and he influenced the 18th century era of the neoclassicism. So was very important to the 18th century. It influenced the architecture, everything that you see in Washington, D.C., for example. All of the columns and all the architecture you see was based upon it. So, as I said, there's 24 books in the Odyssey. It's organized in 3 acts. Generally, 1 through 4 concerns the Telemachy, and this is the introduction of Telemachus or Telemachus, if you prefer, with the situation that his father is missing. You have this setup where he goes to Scheria, where, well, I'm sorry, that's Odysseus. He has escaped from Calypso to Scheria, and he is discovered by Princess Nausicaa in Phaeacia. And there is where he breaks down, and whenever he hears people, the bard there, talking about or doing the poem, he's reading the epic poem about his life, and he breaks down and he confesses that, you know, he is indeed Odysseus. So 1 through 4, chapters 1 through 4 concerns the Telemachy. And that's where Telemachus, he is advised by Mentor, who is actually Athena, disguised as him. 5 through 12 concerns the homecoming and the great wandering, and these are when he finally starts getting on his way. So this is what I mean. It's already that we're starting with the end, and then we have to go back to the beginning and work our way back to that end. Okay. Then 13 through 24 concerns the Odysseus' return to Ithaca. Major themes concern loyalty, identity and duty, homecoming, and fate and divine will. So, Nolan, I'm sorry, but if you don't include all the gods in here, you're not doing them a service to their religion. It was, whether you're a Christian or whether you're an anti-theist, it doesn't matter. This is what they worship. They dedicated hecatombs of 500 head of cattle to their gods, and they would cook the meat, and they would feed their whole cities with these. They would partake of the sacrifice, and they would burn the bones for the gods. So that was all part of their worship. So whenever you disrespect this piece of work, it is a vandalism of their culture. And you took money from these people, a lot of money, and then you turn around and stab them in the back. How is that a good thing? To make your little modern preachy lecture. Lupita's lecturing Homer. How dare you? You have to be an utter bonehead or something, because you got a master's degree at Yale and you'd never read the work, and then you said that you read it after you got the script, and obviously you didn't. I mean, because if you did, you would understand what was going on. Yeah, I get it. It's a long work, and it's slog, and it's not as much slog as watching your movie, though. I can tell you that. It's at least exciting, and it's a great work of art. Aristotle touts it as the highest art form. Epic is the highest art form, and Homer is the highest. So that's why you had so many poets throughout the ages who copied them, who used the ring composition and the form and everything. You have, following Homer, you had Virgil's Aeneid that was commissioned by the Emperor Augustus to establish that Aeneas was connected to the Trojans, and why you couldn't trust the Greeks. Okay, that is where you get the mention of Sinon, and we're going to talk about that. That is definitely the character I dislike the most. Because she's just not. She, whatever. Who cares? Look, Sinon, they do have Sinon in a brief scene in the 97 miniseries, but it's done so superior. It's done by a man, okay, as Sinon having been left behind, because they're sacking Troy. They're going to sack Troy, and he's come up with the stratagem. Well, Odysseus has come up with the stratagem of the Trojan horse, and they're waiting inside while Sinon is lying to the Trojans and saying it's a gift, hospitality gift. And in their culture, according to hospitality, if someone offers you a gift, you have to take it. You're obligated to, okay, whether you like it or not. but they're questioning him anyway. And then there's this soothsayer who comes along by the name of Laocoon, and he says, don't trust Greeks who bear gifts. And Poseidon's sea monster reaches up and grabs him off the shorelines and eats him. And that's how Poseidon had helped Odysseus, because he was about to be discovered. Okay, so it is a very brief, important character that is introduced by Virgil, not Homer, some 800 years later. So whenever we look at these characters, that is why whenever Odysseus goes in to sack Troy, he doesn't offend Athena. Athena wants him to do that. She wants him to. She is his protector. She doesn't give this resting bitch face and disapproval and show up as some woman who's being beheaded. Oh, come on. Really, Nolan? It's just, it's untenable. It's not a logical choice. If you just stuck to the story the way it was told and just show it. That's what Aristotle always says, characters don't tell. You did a lot of telling here without making any kind of logical connection whatsoever. I don't get any cohesion between the characters, and especially when you bring in people who were barely there anyway and only had very small parts, just a few minutes long. I mean, and then you have this long preachy thing where Odysseus is he's having PTSD and he can't remember things because Calypso has been feeding him lotus. Those two different episodes in the poem, by the way, they are not the same. Okay. The whole time that he's with Calypso, he's weeping because he wants to get home, and he's there 7 years. Can you imagine being someone's? He could have stayed there, and he was offered immortality. He would never age. He would be living with a goddess in paradise. And where do they show him? They show him on some desert. They filmed part of this in Morocco. I think some part of it in the Sahara. Part of it in Greece, but you don't even show up in Greece for the press conference, really? Wow. All around the world, but not in Greece itself, where the events take place in Troy. Which, by the way, Troy, the real Troy was located in Turkey, what we consider now Turkey, so Asia Minor. All right. So anyway, but this is a story about a man who has been at war. He was at war for 10 years. He's the hero because he ended the war. He did not start the war. This is one of the things that is really misleading. It's thinking Odysseus has all this guilt because he started the war. No, this is not about war. It's not about the war itself. It is about the fact that what he has guilt at is all of his men being killed and putting them in this position because of his pride, his hubris, his overweening pride that causes him to not give thanks to Poseidon. He told Poseidon, I can do anything. I don't need you gods. And Poseidon just says, are you kidding me? If it hadn't been for me, you would have been discovered. All right, so, so much for that. You're going to suffer for that. And Athena continues to be his protector. And, when you need to know something about the panoply of gods too, of Olympus, the structure and hierarchy of the elder gods and goddesses, and the demigods like the sea nymphs like Calypso and Thetis. Okay. And those the naiads, those kinds of demigods. But we have two main characters there who, you know, they don't have major roles in the Odyssey, but they do have mentions, such as Helen, who is the face that lost 1,000 ships and burnt the toppled towers of Ilium, according to Christopher Marlowe's The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus. He brings the shade of Helen back as to be his paramour, but anyway, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Okay, I don't really get this choice. Nolan. Vanessa Williams as Calypso is far superior. She was a Miss America in the '97 miniseries. She was. There were a lot of very attractive black women that you could have used, and people would. Back then, they didn't say a word about it. But with Helen, she has this. She's described in the epithet as white-armed Helen. Athena is also described as being gray-eyed, and by that meaning they're startling and piercing, and her symbol animal is an owl. Okay, she can see even in the dark. She is a goddess of wisdom and warfare. So she wants Odysseus going. She's not sitting there lecturing him, oh, you started this war. No, he didn't start this war. Helen and Paris started this war. Because there are two different sources there. You could consider that Helen ran off with Paris, or that she was abducted by Paris. But either way, Troy, because Paris was visiting Sparta, he violated the notion of hospitality. He violated the hospitality of Menelaus, and that's when Menelaus got Agamemnon involved, and then they both came to Ithaca to invoke the sworn allyship. You also have Achilles there. Achilles is completely proxied by Ellen, whatever. What in the world were you thinking whenever you put that 5'1", 90-pound woman transformed into a kind of, I don't know, chimera? What were you thinking when you gave her that speech, him that speech in Hades? He speaks, Odysseus speaks to Sinon first instead of Tiresias. What's up with that? And then gets berated. Achilles doesn't berate Odysseus, but you've got guilt in him for the war, and he mopes through the whole thing, and it's, you know, there's so many other, there are a lot of technical issues too, like lighting. The sound in the theater was absolutely deafening. I had to literally stop my ears like this. Okay. It actually hurt my ears with that loudest sound. It was horrible sound mixing. Everybody talks about it. It's not just me. So, What was that all about? What's up with showing hiring Travis Scott? You're comparing ancient epic literature that was recited town to town, and that was not only their entertainment but also their instruction. I don't feel instructed by this. I feel like I'm being lectured, yeah, but it's empty. It's hollow. It doesn't resonate with me because it doesn't affect me at all. Isn't it your job as a filmmaker to affect me? I'm a very sensitive person too. I am not someone who just doesn't care about people and all that kind of thing. I taught college English from 1990 until 2018, and I've been retired since then. I have PTSD from it. I don't want to talk about it, but I will say, believe me, academia is a snake pit. Anyway, this adaptation that you did, Nolan, I've got to say this. The Coen brothers, they admitted that they hadn't read the Odyssey when they did Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And they did a better job because they made it into a comedy and they set it in modern times, and they could have more modern English, where doing it in modern American English with the Brooklyn accent or whatever kind of American accent that they have, it takes you out of the mood of it. I thought that the 97 miniseries with Armand Assant is the best. It follows the story pretty well, okay? It cuts some things out like the Lestrygonians and the Lotus Eaters, and it added like the scene was seen on that was done much better. But they also included the gods, and Armand Assant, he is believable. He's believable as Odysseus. You feel sorry for him when he gets stranded on Ogygia with Calypso, and she keeps him. She basically, keeps him as her sex slave for 7 years. Oh, what a terrible thing to be a sex slave of a goddess. Okay. The whole time his eyes are filled with tears every day. He sits on the beach and longs to go home, and she makes him this offer, and he just goes, I know that you're more comely than Penelope is. You're a goddess. You're immortal. You're offering me all this stuff, but I'd rather be with her. He wants to be with her. He's been apart from her at that point for 20 years. 10 years for the war and 10 years getting back. So, anyway, we were talking about Homer, the portrayal of Homer by Travis Scott. The guy's not even an actor. And comparing rap to epic music, that's just absurd. There's so much that's absurd about that. Now let's talk about the characters themselves. Matt Damon, this is nothing against your acting. You play Matt Damon. Anne Hathaway played Anne Hathaway. She was talking to a friend of hers, was telling her something about the Odyssey that was completely wrong, and she just swallowed it, and she went with that interpretation. She hasn't read it. You didn't even bother with the Cliff Notes, I guess. I mean, and how many didn't even bother with that? No, nobody reads anymore. I'm a dinosaur. I admit it. I studied for this for a long time, and I can tell you, I find it highly offensive. Highly offensive. I'm outraged. I had so many moments where I was just scoffing, and I had to kind of check myself, because I thought, you know, I'm going to disturb someone in the theater because I'm so disgusted, and I felt like walking out, but I stayed. I stayed, and I sat through the whole 3 long hours, and felt like I needed a bath afterwards. It just made me feel dirty after watching that. So these characters, they took me out. The color took me out. It was so drab. The settings, the desert setting. Seeing on Elliot running through the desert in this little tiny armor, and then being described as the greatest warrior that Odysseus had ever known. Odysseus, are you kidding? Really? that is what and you had him speaking in Hades before even Tiresias, and the ram offering was for Tiresias so he could find out how to get home. Okay? Doesn't make any sense. He's supposed to talk to Achilles. He doesn't talk to Achilles, he talks to Sinon. Or Sinon talks to him, berating him. He's supposed to see his mother there in Hades. Anticlea. By the way, Anticlea in the 1997 miniseries, that was played by Irene Pappas, and she has appeared in so many. I had posted this on X about her. She played Odysseus's mother, who kills herself for grief because she believes that her son is dead, and she gets down to Hades and he's not there. Now, let's make sure that we understand that Hades and hell, yes, they are kind of the same, but she's not punished like in Tartarus, like the Titans, okay? The Titans were punished in Tartarus, and they were given eternal torture, so for trying to overtake the gods. Anyway, so this is just some notes. You want to see a good adaptation and more modernization of a story by an author? Can you see this? James Joyce, Ulysses. Some of you probably know that the 1954 version with Kirk Douglas was also called Ulysses. That's a Roman name for Odysseus. It's named by Virgil, but anyway. So it's got a loose structuring. There are many other adaptations. There are mentions of various mythological figures, like Tiresias is mentioned by T.S. Eliot in The Wasteland. He's mentioned by Ezra Pound in the Cantos. He is mentioned by Tennyson. Milton was influenced in writing Paradise Lost by the structure of the Iliad and Odyssey. So all of these things are influenced by the work, and it's lasted this long. Don't kill it. Oh, well, what am I saying? You already killed it with modern politics, modern political issues. Don't do that. Don't do that. That made my job so much harder. You know, when even Emily Wilson, whose intersectional feminist work influences this, it influenced you. And then you had to take it the next step and the next step and the next step, when even she has to get on to you and tell you, you have lost the soul of the story. Because you had to lecture us. You had through Odysseus. Anyway, those are my 2 cents. I'm going to shut up, because I don't really have any more to say about it, except as far as a rating, out of a 10, I give it a 3.5. There were some scenes that I found, the action did tend to pull me in a little bit more, but not as much as the other versions of this that I have seen before. It's been done better and much earlier too. Even the 1954 is better than this. As far as I'm concerned, a 3.5 out of 10, that's a 35 out of 100. That means it fails on every level for me. I'm sorry, I did not enjoy it. I just was outraged by it. But anyway, I did not address the issue of Lupita very much, except to say you shouldn't have double cast her as a twin sister. Clytemnestra was not a twin sister of Helen. They had different fathers. Helen's father was Zeus. That's why she was so beautiful, because she was part goddess, just like Hercules was part god. Achilles, his mother was Thetis, the sea nymph. She's also featured as the mother of Calibos in Clash of the Titans. So, the final thing concerns the gods, and portraying them accurately. I did not feel like there was any connection with Athena. She was very important to this story, and you just it's an appearance by Zendaya. That's it. It doesn't tell me anything about her wisdom, and it had nothing to do with the story or why she was patron goddess of Odysseus. It just doesn't. Okay. Have respect for their religion and their culture. Culture is downstream from politics, I guess, is or is the other way around. Who cares? It affects us. And one of the things that offends me as a teacher and professor is that your younger generations who haven't read this will watch the movie and they'll believe that version of it without doing any research, because they don't have to. They've got devices, don't they? Again, made my job so much harder when you do that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Go see it. If you enjoy it, fine. I don't care if you enjoy it. I didn't. But I'm pretty well educated on the subject, so I would highly advise that you at least do a little bit of work and at least read something like Cliff Notes if you don't use an actual, good study guide like I got. You don't have to be as invested in it as I was or am. So, but good luck to you, and I'll see you in the funny papers. Bye.